it's good to be filled with people who are older than us, isn't it? I also want to say one more thing about what Sue read today. She read a book by a man named Theodore today, which, if you look at it carefully, is Sig. If you turn it backwards, is Giesel. And that's Theodore Giesel. It's another book by Dr. Seuss. All right, we'll be reading another one of Theodore Sig's books tomorrow. Next week. I don't know if we read it tomorrow, but you guys can read it with me next week. But didn't you like the book from this week called If I Ran the Zoo? Yes. Isn't that a great way to be able to start and look at all these dreams of what we could be? Because how many have at least some dream of how you would run the zoo differently than how it's currently being run? Just a week or so ago, we had 10 people, well, 10 in the regular debate, and 6 or 7 others in the other side debate that all said, this is how I run the zoo. All those presidential candidates. Did you notice we're beginning that presidential cycle? I don't know if you saw that yet. But here we are, we got all these people saying, I want to run the zoo. And we got lots of ideas about what I want to do and how I want to do it. But guess what? They're not here. So we get to say how we want to run the zoo. And what would you change if you ran this zoo? What's something you would change? I get to start. I would, especially with the news of President Carter, I would cure cancer.
Yeah, man.
Would that be a great thing to be able to do? If I could change the zoo, that's what I would do. What would you do if you could run the zoo?
Peace on earth.
Wouldn't that be an amazing thing?
Feed everybody.
Feed everyone.
Cure Alzheimer's.
Who else?
Open the border.
Yes.
Yes.
Make energy free.
Yes.
Homes for children.
Homes for children.
Fund education.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great to have all these things come true? And we should, as people of belief, have these kinds of visions. That impulse we have to look forward and see something that needs to be fixed is something we should nurture. Something we should grow within us and among us. Because I believe that's what the Holy Spirit does, doesn't it? Isn't that how Holy Spirit works in us? And we should be listening to that Spirit. And we should be hearing how Spirit is speaking and moving forward in us. This last week, a week ago, I went to the convocation, and there was definitely Spirit there, wasn't there? There was a lot of Spirit speaking and moving, and this is the biannual celebration by the Reconciling Ministries movement, and it is looking towards, specifically this year, it was looking towards General Conference, and some of the things where we want Spirit to move differently.
What's General Conference?
General Conference is where Methodists come together all over the world. And Reconciling Ministry says we want to try to help Spirit to move there. And we had some amazing things that went in to helping us be together in that type of space. And not just that, but also to remind ourselves that we're together in some of the local efforts that we have in moving things forward. And it was a wonderful celebration. It was called Come to the River. It was about coming to that river and preparing to cross together. Coming to that river and bringing ourselves into community with each other. Coming to that river and reminding ourselves of what God is going to do with us. How God is going to call us forward from believing in love to living in love. And one of the speakers was Bishop Talbert. And Bishop Talbert has done amazing, amazing things. Back from the days when he was walking with Martin Luther King in the civil rights movement to the day when he is working with Reconciling Ministries and trying to extend that vision of who God is. And he reminded us of a quote of one of his favorite authors. His name is Cornel West. And this man said, "Justice is what love looks like in public."
Yes.
Isn't that a great quote? Justice is what love looks like in public. And if we believe in love, if we have felt the power of love, if we are people of love, then we need to become part of that community that is somehow extending that love beyond the boundaries where it currently is at. Like Jacob, we need to have some sense of God loving us and drawing us forward towards something that may, in some ways, feel foreign to us. There Jacob was, back in that place where he was so selfish. But when he began to feel that love, not just the love of God, but then that love of Rachel, he moved to community. Sometimes against all of himself, he moved into that community. And that's what love should do to us, every single one of us, because the Spirit will always lead us into community and into action in that community. So I want to take just a second, kind of a side note, to be able to tell you about one way that I want you to feel God's love and leading in the community. 2 years ago, we brought a young lady from the wilds of Michigan, and we tamed her down, and we grew her up. Her name was Stephanie, and she was our US 2 missionary. And she worked at Ishkashita, and in spite of Barbara's presence, she did marvelous. And you guys helped Stephanie to become an incredible force in this world. Not that she hadn't been something wonderful before, but man, did she grow in a year, in the 2 years, right? She's gone home now. But here's the good news. She was so good, we're replacing her with 2 US 2 missionaries. One's going to Ishkashita, and one is going to the Metro Center at St. James. The missionary that's coming to Ishkashita is Jamie, and over at St. James is a young woman named Catherine. And they are going to arrive within the next couple of weeks, and we're still looking for a place for them to live. We need a house for them. We need a place where they can be there and can have a space to live. We also need people who will bring in things that they might need in that house, things like food. Because we have to pay for their food, and the more donations we have for that, the better. So if you would like to be able to help with that. We're going to have a celebration for them in about a month, and we want you to be at that celebration, and more information will be there. But I want you to help these two young women that are coming to be able to feel the love that is here so that they can grow into what God is calling them to be. And all of our visions should do that, shouldn't they? All of our visions should draw us from somewhere that we are into something better, into something beyond what we've done before. That's our zookeeping coming out. We want to run the zoo, and we should have a vision of how to run that zoo. Our second book is called If I Ran the Circus, and I want to show you just a little bit about what that has to do.
Right click.
Okay. If I ran the circus, it says, here you can see the little boy walking along the wall. That is Morris McGurk. And Morris McGurk has a vision. He says, in all the whole town, the most wonderful spot is behind Sneelock's store in the big vacant lot. It's just the right spot for my wonderful plans, said young Morris McGurk, if I clean up the cans. Now a fellow might... That way. All right. Now a fellow like me, said young Morris McGurk, could get rid of this junk with a half hour's work. I could yank up those weeds and chop down the dead tree and haul off those old cars. There are just 2 or 3. And then the whole place would be ready, you see. You see the vacant lots of our life are easy to overlook. When Stephanie first came here, it would have been easy to overlook her as a missionary. She was shy, she was withdrawn, she didn't look like what she would become. But somehow we have to look at those vacant lots and see what can be. It's the same with our 2 missionaries coming in. It's the same with each other. We have to see beyond what is there. It's the same with everything outside these walls. We have to be able to see in that vacant lot that we see something grander. We have to see something that can be, not just something that is. You have to have a dream in your mind. Something that calls you forward. Something that shows you how you can take this world of ours and draw it to something that God wants it to be. You have to let Spirit speak into you and draw you towards something. How many have a vision of something like that in your head? How many have some way that God is helping you to become? That's the Spirit working within us. That's the way God helps us to become more than what we are. That's the way God comes and changes and improves this world every single day. Do not see things as they are, says the poet, but as they should be. Do not see things as they are, but as they should be. But the problem is, as soon as you do that, what you're going to find out is that your vision sometimes clashes with someone else's vision. How many have found that out? That here you have this great view, I'm going this way, and someone else says, are you sure? Don't you know that? If you do that, this will happen, and our visions will always clash, especially if we're in that space where we're talking about resources. Whether money or human resources, all those things sometimes make us clash. And I see this grand vision for that vacant lot. And you look and say, but it'll cost money. It'll take time. It'll take effort. When I came to St. Francis a year ago, I knew something that you would love. In fact, I talked to you about it before. It's about this mission down in Peru. It's a great place, isn't it, Joe? Joni and I have gone down to the Refuge of Hope a couple of times. I've gone about 8 times. And I love that place, and it's an amazing place. And I thought that by this time we'd have already sent a mission trip down there. But God drew us in different places. We've been doing lots of good stuff this year, haven't we? And it took it so that I didn't go quite where I wanted to go. Here was my vision, and God kind of drags it over here. But how many know that your vision doesn't quite match God's vision? I'm looking at the choirs. And it doesn't matter that you have a really good vision and a vision that has a lot of God in it. God's vision is always larger than our vision, and that's why sometimes we clash with each other. And if we're not careful because of that clash, it's real easy for us to become isolated and alone, and I'll do it all myself. My wife used to complain when she was in school, I hate working in groups, she said. They don't want to do it the right way. They don't put in enough effort, or whatever it happens to be, right? How many have sometimes a hard time working in groups? Working with others because of whatever it is, where their vision is different than your vision, where their vision seems to clash sometimes with your vision. And it's real, when you have such a great vision for that empty lot, it's tough when someone else doesn't see it quite like yours. And it's really simple to clash. Daniel, who we just sent off to seminary out in Washington, D.C., keep him in prayer as he starts classes coming up. He wrote a note on Facebook, and he said, people say the progressive movement has a tendency to turn into a circular firing squad. I think it's shaped more like a series of intermingled firing squads, more like an Olympic rings shaped firing squad. and part of that's because we're often working with very limited resources, it seems like. And we're often non-profits, we're not generating funds, so we have to depend on people to give funds. And so it's real simple to think that, man, I got to fight you for these funds. I got to fight you for these people. I got to fight you for. And it's real simple to see each other as enemies and push each other away and to not share that vision. And Jacob, in our story, has that problem. Jacob, remember, came in from far away, and he discovered love here with Laban's family. Specifically, he discovered love with Rachel. But Laban had a different vision than Jacob. Do you remember what happens from last week? Right, here he goes, and he says, I'll work 7 years in order to marry Rachel. And Laban says, yes, that's a good deal. And he works 7 years, and they have the wedding, and he lifts up the veil, and it's not Rachel, but her sister, Leah. But, see, the older should be married before the younger. Don't you see my vision, says Laban. And Jacob says, yeah, not quite. And they come to an agreement. I'll let you marry Rachel, but you got to work for me 7 more years. And those visions clash. And Jacob does that. He works those 7 more years, and he's got both wives, and they make a family. And that's part of the problem. because most of the family is coming from Leah's side. And Rachel's got all the love, but Leah's got all the children. 6 children to be specific. And then Rachel says, well, I got to do something about this. So she takes her concubine and says, here, she'll give you children. Two children come from there. And so Leah does the same thing, and 2 more come here. And all of a sudden, there's all these kids and all this jealousy going on back and forth. And it's not just that. Also, I think partially because of what Laban did, Jacob begins manipulating the stuff. Not in a bad way. He's very upfront and honest, and he does things well. And he's a good herdsman. And he takes advantage of his father-in-law in a way that makes it so that he's getting all the profits more than his father-in-law. And father-in-law doesn't look like he likes it. And clashes appear. And things happen where community doesn't quite form perfectly, unlike your communities. Have you ever seen that sometimes, despite your best efforts, sometimes community isn't simple, doesn't quite form up and coalesce the way you want it to happen? That's the nature of community, though. It's about placing ourselves in each other's hands and sometimes being disappointed with the results. And so, like Jacob, we want to run. Jacob packs up the family in the middle of the night and off he goes, running away once again. And his father-in-law does a remarkable thing. Laban runs after him and said, why didn't you? Catches up with him and said, why didn't you let me celebrate? Why didn't you, even if we can't be together, why didn't you let me celebrate the community we have? You see, in the moment, that moment of disagreeing, of being different, of being separated, of somehow hurting each other, it's real easy to be able to say, well, maybe we shouldn't try community. And like Jacob, to run away and do something else. When we're fighting for the same resources and you seem to be getting it and I don't, when your vision seems to be against my vision, it's simple for us to be able to separate. So we ask questions like, can Leah be in the same community as me? Can Rachel be here in this community? Can Laban and Jacob live together? And for Jacob, it's another question. Because even if he leaves this community, the place he needs to run back to is to that other community that he already broke, that brother, Esau, who he stole from, who he took so much from, and he said, can I go back to that community? What will happen there? And all of that happens because we forget something. In the midst of seeing our vision, in the midst of seeing something so clearly, it's easy to discount or hurt someone else's vision. And we always have to see community and vision larger than what we see by ourselves. For ours is always great, but remember, God's is always bigger, beyond just what we see. And we have to see each other in the light of that larger vision. We have to see in the midst of whatever it is that is important to me, why it is that your vision, different, is also important. We have to be able to truly form community by seeing something beyond the clashes that might happen between us, the challenges that are there. We have to see how God is moving in us and around us, and we have to let that love in action become love of interaction as well. We have to figure out how to, in the midst of what it is that isn't perfect in our relationship, how to still be in relationship. As I went through Texas, and there's a lot of Texas to go through, I saw a sign like this. Now, have you seen that sign ever before? Now, that's a pretty impressive looking deer. That is not a Texas deer. Not everything is bigger in Texas. Texas deer sit about this high. They're beautiful little beasts, but they are little beasts. And there are a lot of them, right? So you're watching around all the time, and you see lots of deer sometimes. I saw one. But I'm watching for them because I know that they're there. And I see all these signs all over and I'm watching for these deer. But there wasn't a sign to watch out for the bird that hit my windshield. But as soon as it hit my windshield, guess what? I began having a larger vision. I need to watch for them as well, don't I? Not just for the deer that are on the sign, but for the birds that might fly by. And as I'm watching for those birds, I realize there's a whole bunch of bugs that have already hit this. And we have to continually let our vision grow and change as we go. And how many have a hard time sometimes because you want to watch just for the deer that seem to be more important, or that will hurt your car the most? And so you overlook those other things, and we all do that. But our job is to continually open our eyes larger and larger, to be able to see deeper and further, and to be able to enlarge the community that we see. And that's the story that happens in our book. The Circus McGurkus. That vacant lot becomes a circus filled with all kinds of marvelous things. Let me show you some of them. Maybe. Okay. Here he is, the big tent calling everybody in. With the big parade of all the stuff that's going to be there. Look at this. Isn't this a great show? Would you want to see that? This is one who comes from the moon and only eats moonstones. There's Mr. Sneelock bringing those stones in so he can eat. And of course, Sneelock also works with the lemonade stand and the balloon stand. And have you noticed Mr. Sneelock has been present quite a bit? Not that he does everything, because there's lots of other things that get done by others. Over here is a little guy who juggles punctuation marks. But Mr. Sneelock, you might have noticed, does a whole lot of stuff. I like this picture especially. There he is working away. Here's the final act. Mr. Sneelock gets dragged up by his pipe 4,692 feet and then dives down into a bowl, a fish bowl. And the young man says, don't ask how he'll manage. That's his job, not mine. And how many are pretty glad that you have a Sneelock in your life at some point or another that does something for you, that somehow helps you, that somehow does things so that you don't have to worry about it? And we all depend on Sneelocks. But here's the thing. We all need to be Sneelocks for each other. For as important as my vision is, as important as I want you to see this that I want you to do, I also need to hear what it is that you need me to do. And that's the only way we truly become community. Not by just all of you listening to me, but by all of us listening to each other. By all of us not just hearing each other, but by becoming involved with each other. And that doesn't mean that you have to do everything like Sneelock for each other. It means that you have to figure out in the vision that somebody else has what it is that you can do. And it might be that they need a few of your hours. And you can go and do something for that vision. It might be that you can come over to them and just put an arm around their shoulder and say, I'm with you. It might be a more active prayer moment where you're there not just in words, but you're there actively supporting them in prayer. It might be, they may not need it, but it might be that you can give them a few dollars. There's lots of ways to be in active ministry with each other, isn't there? Lots of ways that we can see the vision of someone else and help that vision come true. And our job is to continually listen to each other and allow each other's visions to come into our hearts and change us and make us more than what we are. Why, he'll be a hero. He won't mind when he finds that he has a big circus behind. That should be us. that when we hear about each other's circuits, when Eric calls out something that we haven't heard before, our job is to be Sneelock and listen and become that. This week, Tuesday of this week, was a certain saint day. It was the day for St. Clare of Assisi. Anybody heard of her? St. Clare of Assisi sat over there in Assisi, and suddenly there was this crazy guy who had a vision, a dream, an idea of what could be. St. Francis called that dream out, and Clare listened. And she had her own ideas of things, right? But she listened and allowed that other dream to affect her and become who she was as well. And that's what we have to do. Just like St. Clare, we have to let that larger voice affect us. We have to let each other's voice become part of our idea of the future for us. That's how we become community, is by allowing those voices to speak into our hearts again and again. And St. Clare said this: we become what we love, and what we love shapes what we become. When we begin to love not just our vision, but their vision, when we begin to love larger and larger, then we truly allow God to draw us into the larger community that we need to be. Jacob took his 2 wives and all his kids and all his possessions, and he came to a river, just like we did at the Reconciling Convocation. We come to the river, but God calls us not just to come to the river, but to cross that river. And the family did. Jacob sent his wives, and those 11 boys, and that one girl, and all those animals, and all those possessions, and he sent them across the river Jabbok. But he was too afraid to go across, because on the other side was that community that he had broken. On the other side was his brother Esau. And he wasn't sure, could he have community with Esau after what he'd done, after the running away that had happened? And he sat on this side of the river. And that night, it says he wrestled. Sometimes we say he wrestled with God. And he wrestled all night long, it said. It was a mighty battle. But I believe what it was, if he was wrestling with God, he was wrestling with the God inside of him. That voice of God that was drawing him beyond what he'd been. Because what Jacob wanted to do was go back and be that isolationist that he had been. That selfish person he had been. To not open himself up to the larger community that God was calling him to. And so there he was, struggling with himself, struggling with that God voice that's calling him beyond himself. And he wasn't sure he could do it. He wasn't sure what Esau would do. And in the morning he woke up and he stepped into the river. Fearful still, but determined to at least try to see what could happen with community. And he makes his way across that river, each step harder than the one before, for it brought him closer to Esau and whatever hate would be there. And when he got there, instead of retribution, instead of revenge, instead of hatred, what he found were open arms. And he found a brother who said, I'm ready to be your brother again. I've missed you. I need you. Come and be part of community with me. When you look at your brothers and sisters, when you look at those around you, even those that you're not sure you want to be community with, know that God is already working there. That God is doing amazing things there. That God is drawing your hearts together. And give yourself over to that community. And let God move in you, even as God is already moving in them. And let that community become the wonderful community that God envisions. Amen?
Amen.